collection on monastic law, a translation of the Pali Vinaya Pitaka into English, translated by Bhikkhu Brahmali and read by Angus Cargill. The Training Rule on Indecent Speech. Origin story. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Savatthi in the Jeta Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. At that time, Venerable Udayi was staying in a beautiful dwelling in the wilderness. On one occasion, a number of women came to the monastery to see the dwellings. They approached Udayi and said, "Venerable, we would like to see your dwelling." Then, after showing them his dwelling, he praised and disparaged their private parts. He requested and implored, asked and inquired, described, instructed, and abused their private parts. The shameless and indecent women flirted with Udayi. They called out to him, laughed with him, and teased him. But after leaving, those of them who had a sense of shame complained to the monks, "Venerables, this isn't suitable or appropriate. We wouldn't want to hear such speech from our own husbands, let alone from Venerable Udayi." The monks of few desires complained and criticized him. How could Venerable Udayi speak indecently to women? They rebuked Udayi in many ways and told the Buddha. The Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned Udayi. "Is it true, Udayi, that you spoke like this?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked him. "It's not suitable, foolish man. It's not proper. It's not worthy of a monastic. It's not allowable. It should not be done. How could you speak like this? Haven't I given many teachings for the sake of dispassion, not for the sake of passion, the stilling of the fevers of sensual pleasure? This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. If a monk, overcome by lust and with a distorted mind, speaks indecent words to a woman, as a young man might to a young woman and referring to sexual intercourse, he commits an offense entailing suspension. The Training Rule on Satisfying One's Own Desires. Origin story. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Savatthi in the Jeta Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. At that time, Venerable Udayi was associating with and visiting a number of families in Savatthi. One morning, Udayi robed up, took his bowl and robe, and went to the house of a beautiful widow where he sat down on the prepared seat. She then approached Udayi, bowed, and sat down. And Udayi instructed, inspired, and gladdened her with a teaching. She then said, "Venerable, please tell me what you need. I can give robe cloth, alms food, a dwelling, and medicinal supplies." It's not hard for us to get those requisites. Give instead what's hard for us to get. What's that, Venerable? Sexual intercourse. Is it wanted now? Yes. Saying, "Come," she entered her bedroom, took off her wrap, and lay back on the bed. Udayi went up to her and spat out, "Who would touch this stinking wretch?" And he left. That woman then complained and criticized him. "These Sakyan monastics are shameless and immoral liars. They claim to have integrity, to be celibate and of good conduct, to be truthful, moral, and good. But they don't have the good character of a monastic or Brahmin. They've lost the plot. How could the ascetic Udayi ask for sexual intercourse from me, but then spit out, 'Who would touch this stinking wretch?' and leave? What's bad about me? How am I stinking? How am I inferior to anyone?" Other women, too, criticized him in the same way. The monks heard the criticism of those women, and the monks of few desires complained and criticized him. How could Venerable Udayi encourage a woman to satisfy his own desires? Those monks rebuked Udayi in many ways, and then told the Buddha. The Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned Udayi. "Is it true, Udayi, that you did this?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked him. "It's not suitable, foolish man. It's not proper. It's not worthy of a monastic. It's not allowable. It's not to be done. How could you do such a thing? Haven't I given many teachings for the sake of dispassion, not for the sake of passion, the stilling of the fevers of sensual pleasure? This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this." Final ruling. If a monk, overcome by lust and with a distorted mind, encourages a woman to satisfy his own desires, saying, "Sister, she provides the highest service, who in this way satisfies one like me, who is virtuous, celibate, and of good character," and if it is a reference to sexual intercourse, he commits an offense entailing suspension. The training rule on matchmaking. Origin story, first sub-story. At one time, when the Buddha was staying at Savatthi in Anathapindika's monastery, Venerable Udayi was associating with and visiting a number of families in Savatthi. When Udayi saw a young man without a wife or a young woman without a husband, he would praise the young woman to the parents of a young man. "The young woman of such and such a family is beautiful, intelligent, skilled and diligent. She is suitable for your son." They would reply, "They don't know who we are, Venerable. If you could persuade them to give the girl, we would take her for our son." And he praised the young man to the parents of a young woman. "The young man of such and such a family is handsome, intelligent, skilled, and diligent. He's suitable for your daughter." They would reply, "They don't know who we are, Venerable, and we would be ashamed to speak to them for the sake of the girl. But if you could persuade them to ask us, we would give our girl to the young man." In this way he arranged for the taking of a bride, for the giving of a bride, and for marriage. At that time there was a former courtesan who had a beautiful daughter. On one occasion, some lay followers of the Ajivaka religion came from another village and said to that courtesan, "Madam, please give your girl to our boy." "I don't know who you are, sirs, and I won't give my only daughter to be taken to another village." People asked those Ajivaka lay followers why they had come. They replied, "We came to ask that courtesan to give her daughter to our son, but she refused." "But why did you ask the courtesan? You should speak to Venerable Udayi. He'll persuade her." They then went to Udayi and said, "Venerable, we've asked that courtesan here to give her daughter to our son, but she refused. Would you please persuade her to give her daughter?" Udayi agreed. Soon afterwards he went to that courtesan and said, "Why didn't you give them your daughter?" "I don't know who they are, sir, and I won't give my only daughter to be taken to another village." "Please give her to them. I know them." "If you know them, I'll give her away." She then gave her daughter to those Ajivaka followers, and they took her away. For a month they treated her like a daughter-in-law, but then like a slave. The girl sent a message to her mother saying, "Mom, I'm unhappy and miserable. For a month they treated me like a daughter-in-law, but then like a slave. Come, Mum, and take me home." Soon afterwards, the courtesan went to those Ajivakas and said, "Please don't treat my girl like a slave. Treat her properly." They replied, "We deal with the monastic, not with you. Go away. We don't want anything to do with you." Being dismissed, she returned to Savatthi. A second time the girl sent the same message to her mother. That courtesan then went to Udai and said, "Venerable, my girl is unhappy and miserable. They treated her like a daughter-in-law for a month, but then like a slave. Please tell them to treat her properly." Udai went to the Ajivakas and said, "Please don't treat this girl like a slave. Treat her properly." They replied, "We deal with the courtesan, not with you. A monastic shouldn't get involved. You should behave like a proper monastic. So go away. We don't want anything to do with you." Being dismissed, he returned to Savatthi. A third time that girl sent the same message to her mother, and a second time the courtesan went to Udai and told him the same thing. He replied, "When I first went, they just dismissed me. Go yourself, I'm not going." Then that courtesan complained and criticized him. "May Venerable Udai be miserable and unhappy, just as my girl is miserable and unhappy because of her nasty mother-in-law, father-in-law, and husband." The girl too complained and criticized him in the same way, as did other women who were unhappy with their mothers-in-law, fathers-in-law, and husbands. But those women who were happy with their in-laws wished him well, saying, "May Venerable Udai be happy and well, just as we are happy and well because of our good mothers-in-law, fathers-in-law, and husbands." The monks heard that some women were criticizing him, whereas others were wishing him well, and the monks of few desires complained and criticized him. How could Venerable Udai act as a matchmaker? They told the Buddha. The Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned Udai. "Is it true, Udai, that you do this?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked him. "Foolish man, how could you do this? This will affect people's confidence." And monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Preliminary ruling. If a monk acts as a matchmaker, conveying a man's intention to a woman or a woman's intention to a man, for marriage or for an affair, he commits an offense entailing suspension. In this way, the Buddha laid down this training rule for the monks. Second sub-story. Soon afterwards, a number of scoundrels who were enjoying themselves in a park sent a message to a sex worker saying, "Please come, let's enjoy ourselves in the park." She replied, "Sirs, I don't know who you are. I'm wealthy. I don't want to go outside the city." The messenger returned the message. A certain man then said to those men, "Why did you ask the sex worker? You should speak to Venerable Udai. He'll persuade her." But a certain Buddhist lay follower said, "No way. That's not allowable for the Sakyan monastics. He won't do it." And they made a bet on whether he would. Those scoundrels then went to Udai and said, "Venerable, while we were enjoying ourselves in the park, we sent a message to such and such a sex worker, asking her to come, but she refused. Would you please persuade her?" Udai agreed. He then went to that sex worker and said, "Why don't you go to those men?" She told him why. "Please go. I know them." "If you know them, sir, I'll go." And those men took her to the park. Then that lay follower complained and criticized him. How could Venerable Udai act as a matchmaker for a brief affair? The monks heard it, and the monks of few desires complained and criticized him. How could Venerable Udai act as a matchmaker for a brief affair? They rebuked Udai in many ways, and then told the Buddha. Soon afterwards, he had the Sangha gathered and questioned Udayi. Is it true, Udayi, that you did this? It's true, sir. The Buddha rebuked him. Foolish man, how could you do this? This will affect people's confidence. And so, monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. If a monk acts as a matchmaker, conveying a man's intention to a woman or a woman's intention to a man, for marriage or for an affair, even if just a brief one, he commits an offence entailing suspension. The training rule on building huts. Origin story. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Rajagaya in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. And at that time, the monks of Alavi were building huts by means of begging. The huts were intended for themselves, did not have a sponsoring owner, and were inappropriately large. And since they were never finished, the monks kept on begging and asking, please give a man, a servant, an ox, a cart, a machete, a hatchet, an axe, a spade, a chisel. Give creepers, bamboo, reeds, grass, clay. People felt oppressed by all the begging and asking, so much that when they saw a monk they became alarmed and fearful. They turned away, took a different path, ran off, and closed their doors. They even ran away when they saw cows, thinking they were monks. Just then, Venerable Mahāsāṃghika, after completing the rainy season residence at Rajagaya, set out for Alavi. When he eventually arrived, he stayed at the Agalava shrine. One morning, Venerable Mahāsāṃghika robed up, took his bowl and robe, and entered Alavi for alms. When people saw him, they became alarmed and fearful. They turned away, took a different path, ran off, and closed their doors. When he had eaten his meal and returned from alms round, Venerable Mahāsāṃghika returned and said to the monks, there used to be plenty of alms food in Alavi, and it was easy to get by on alms. But now there's a shortage, and it's hard to get by. Why is that? The monks told Venerable Mahāsāṃghika what had happened. Soon afterwards, the Buddha too set out wandering toward Alavi after staying at Rajagaya for as long as he liked. When he eventually arrived, he too stayed at the Agalava shrine. Venerable Mahāsāṃghika then went to see the Buddha, bowed, sat down, and told him what had happened. The Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned the monks of Alavi. Is it true, monks, that this is happening? It's true, sir. The Buddha rebuked them. Foolish men, how can you act like this? This will affect people's confidence. After rebuking them, he gave a teaching and addressed the monks. Jataka. Once upon a time, monks, two sages who were brothers, lived near the river Ganges. On one occasion, the dragon king Manikanta emerged from the Ganges and went up to the younger sage. He encircled him with 7 coils and spread his large hood over his head. Then, because of his fear of that dragon, the younger sage became thin, haggard and pale, with veins protruding all over his body. The older sage saw him like this and asked him what was the matter. The younger sage told him. The elder sage said, So, do you want that dragon to stay away? Yes. Well then, did you see anything belonging to that dragon? I saw an ornamental gem on his neck. In that case, ask the dragon for that gem. Soon the dragon king again emerged from the Ganges and went up to the younger sage. And the sage said to him, "Sir, give me the gem. I want the gem." The dragon thought, "The monk is asking for the gem. He wants the gem," and he left in a hurry. Once more the Dragon King emerged from the Ganges and approached the younger sage. The sage saw him coming and said to him, "Sir, give me the gem. I want the gem." When the dragon heard him, he turned around right there. Yet again the Dragon King emerged from the Ganges. The younger sage saw him emerging and said to him, "Sir, give me the gem. I want the gem." The Dragon King then spoke these verses to the sage. "My food and drink are abundant and sublime, and they appear because of this gem. I won't give it to you. You ask too much, nor will I return to your hermitage. Like a youth holding a sword polished on a rock, you frighten me asking for this gem. I won't give it to you. You ask too much, nor will I return to your hermitage." And the Dragon King Manikanta thought, "The monk is asking for the gem. He wants the gem." And he left and never returned. Because he did not get to see that beautiful dragon, the young sage became even thinner, more haggard and pale, his veins protruding even more. The older sage saw him like this and asked what was the matter. He replied, "It's because I no longer get to see that beautiful dragon." The older sage then spoke to him in verse. "One shouldn't beg from those one wishes to be dear to. One is detested for asking for too much. When the Brahmin asked the dragon for his gem, it left and was never to be seen again. One will be disliked even by animals, monks, for begging and asking, let alone by human beings." Story. At one time, monks, a certain monk lived in a forest grove on the slopes of the Himalayas. Not far from that grove was a large low-lying marsh. A great flock of birds fed in the marsh during the day and entered the grove to roost at night. The monk was disturbed by the noise of the flocking birds, and so he came to see me. He bowed, sat down, and I said to him, "I hope you're keeping well, monk. I hope you're getting by. I hope you're not tired from traveling. And where have you come from?" "I'm keeping well, sir. I'm getting by. I'm not tired from traveling." He then explained where he had come from, adding, "That's where I've come from, sir. I left because I was disturbed by the noise of that flock of birds." "Do you want that flock of birds to stay away?" "Yes, sir." "Well then, go back to that forest grove. In the first part of the night, call out 3 times and say, 'Listen to me, good birds. I want a feather from anyone roosting in this forest grove. Each one of you must give me a feather.' And in the middle and last part of the night, do the same thing." The monk returned to that forest grove and did as instructed. That flock of birds thought, "The monk is asking for a feather. He wants a feather," and they left that grove and never returned. One will be disliked even by animals, monks, for begging and asking, let alone by human beings. The father of Ratapala monks once spoke to his son with this verse: "All these people, Ratapala, who come to me and beg, I don't even know them, so why don't you beg from me? The beggar is disliked, and so is one who doesn't give when asked. That's why I do not beg from you. Please don't hate me for this." If the gentleman Ratapala could say this to his own father, how much more can one person to another? It's hard, monks, for householders to acquire and protect their possessions. And still, foolish men, you kept on begging and asking for all sorts of things. This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. When a monk, by means of begging, builds a hut without a sponsoring owner and intended for himself, it is to be no more than 12 standard handspans long and 7 wide inside. He must have monks approve a site where no harm will be done, and which has space on all sides. If a monk, by means of begging, builds a hut on a site where harm will be done, and which lacks space on all sides, or he does not have monks approve the site, or he exceeds the right size, he commits an offence entailing suspension. The training rule on building dwellings. Origin story. At one time, when the Buddha was staying at Kosambi in Gosita's monastery, a householder who was a supporter of Venerable Channa said to him, "I'll have a dwelling built for you, Venerable, if you would find a site for it." When Venerable Channa was clearing a site for that dwelling, he felled a tree that served as a shrine and was revered by village, town, district, and kingdom. People complained and criticized him. How could the Sakyan monastics fell a tree that serves as a shrine and is revered by village, town, district, and kingdom? They are hurting one-sensed life. The monks heard the criticism of those people, and the monks of few desires complained and criticized Venerable Channa in the same way. After rebuking Venerable Channa in many ways, they told the Buddha. Soon afterwards he had the Sangha gathered and questioned Channa. "Is it true, Channa, that you did this?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked him. "Foolish man, how could you do this? People perceive trees as conscious. This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. When a monk builds a large dwelling with a sponsoring owner and intended for himself, he must have monks approve a site where no harm will be done and which has space on all sides. If a monk builds a large dwelling on a site where harm will be done and which lacks space on all sides, or he does not have monks approve the site, he commits an offence entailing suspension. The training rule on anger. Origin story. At one time, when the Buddha was staying at Rajagaya in the bamboo grove, Venerable Dabba the Malian realized perfection at the age of 7. He had achieved all there is to achieve by a disciple and had nothing further to do. Then, while reflecting in private, he thought, "How can I be of service to the Sangha? Why don't I assign the dwellings and designate the meals?" In the evening, Dabba came out of seclusion and went to the Buddha. He bowed, sat down, and said, "Sir, while I was reflecting in private, it occurred to me that I've achieved all there is to achieve by a disciple, and I was wondering how I could be of service to the Sangha. I thought, why don't I assign the dwellings and designate the meals?" "Good, good, Dabba. Please do so." "Yes." Soon afterwards, the Buddha gave a teaching and addressed the monks. "Monks, the Sangha should appoint Dabba the Malian as the assigner of dwellings and the designator of meals. And he should be appointed like this. First, Dabba should be asked. A competent and capable monk should then inform the Sangha. Please, Venerables, I ask the Sangha to listen. If the Sangha is ready, it should appoint Venerable Dabba the Malian as assigner of dwellings and designator of meals. This is the motion. Please, Venerables, I ask the Sangha to listen. The Sangha appoints Venerable Daba the Malian as assigner of dwellings and designator of meals. Any monk who approves of appointing Venerable Daba as assigner of dwellings and designator of meals should remain silent. Any monk who doesn't approve should speak up. The Sangha has appointed Venerable Daba the Malian as assigner of dwellings and designator of meals. The Sangha approves and is therefore silent. I'll remember it thus. Daba assigned dwellings to the monks according to their character. He assigned dwellings in the same place to those monks who were experts on the discourses, thinking, they'll recite the discourses to one another. And he did likewise for the experts on the monastic law, thinking, they'll discuss the monastic law. For the expounders of the teaching, thinking, they'll discuss the teaching. For the meditators, thinking, they won't disturb each other. And for the gossips and the bodybuilders, thinking, in this way, even these venerables will be happy. When monks arrived at night, he entered the fire element and assigned dwellings with the help of that light. Monks even arrived late on purpose, hoping to see the marvel of Daba's supernatural powers. They would approach Daba and say, Venerable Daba, please assign us a dwelling. Where would you like to stay? They would intentionally suggest somewhere far away. On the Vulture Peak, at Robber's Cliff, on Black Rock on the slope of Mount Isigili, in the Satapani Cave on the slope of Mount Vebara, in Cool Grove on the hill at the Snake's Pool, at Gautamaka Gorge, at Tinduka Gorge, at Tapoda Gorge, in Tapoda Park, in Jivaka's Mango Grove, in the Deer Park at Madakuchi. Daba then entered the fire element, and with his finger glowing, he walked in front of those monks. They followed behind him with the help of that light, and he would assign them dwellings. This is the bed, this is the bench, this the mattress, this the pillow, this the place for defecating, this the place for urinating, this the water for drinking, this the water for washing, this the walking stick. These are the Sangha's agreements concerning the right time to enter and the right time to leave. Daba then returned to the bamboo grove. At that time, the monks Mettiya and Bhumajaka were only newly ordained. They had little merit, getting inferior dwellings and meals. The people of Rajagaya were keen to give specially prepared alms food to the senior monks, ghee, oil, and special curries, but to the monks Mettina and Bhumajaka they gave ordinary food of porridge and broken rice. When they had eaten their meal and returned from alms round, they asked the senior monks, "What did you get at the dining hall?" Some said, "We got ghee, oil, and special curries." But the monks Mettiya and Bhumajaka said, "We didn't get anything except ordinary food of porridge and broken rice." At that time there was a householder who gave a regular meal of fine food to 4 monks. He made his offering in the dining hall, together with his wives and children. Some of them offered rice, some bean curry, some oil, and some special curries. On one occasion, the meal to be given by this householder on the following day had been designated to the monks Mettiya and Bhumajaka. Just then that householder went to the monastery on some business. He approached Daba, bowed, and sat down. And Daba instructed, inspired, and gladdened him with a teaching. After the talk, he asked Daba, "Sir, who has been designated to receive tomorrow's meal in our house?" "Mettiya and Bhumajaka." He was disappointed and thought, "Why should bad monks eat in our house?" After returning to his house, he told a female slave, "For those who are coming for tomorrow's meal, prepare seats in the gatehouse and serve them broken rice and porridge. Yes, sir. The monks Mattiya and Bhumajaka said to each other, Yesterday we were designated a meal from that householder who offers fine food. Tomorrow he'll serve us together with his wives and children. Some of them will offer us rice, some bean curry, some oil, and some special curries. And because they were excited, they did not sleep properly that night. The following morning they robed up, took their bowls and robes, and went to the house of that householder. When the female slave saw them coming, she prepared seats in the gatehouse and said to them, Please sit, venerables. They thought, The meal can't be ready, since we're given seats in the gatehouse. She then brought them broken rice and porridge and said, Eat, sirs. But, sister, we've come for the regular meal. I know, but yesterday I was told by the head of the household to serve you like this. Please eat. They said to each other, Yesterday this householder came to the monastery and spoke with Daba. Daba must be responsible for this split between the householder and us. And because they were dejected, they did not eat as much as they had intended. When they had eaten their meal and returned from alms round, they put their bowls and robes away and squatted on their heels outside the monastery gatehouse, using their upper robes as back and knee straps. They were silent and humiliated, their shoulders drooping and their heads down, glum and speechless. Just then the nun Mattiya came to them and said, My respectful greetings to you, venerables. But they did not respond. A second time and a third time she said the same thing, but they still did not respond. Have I done something wrong? Why don't you respond? It's because we've been badly treated by Daba the Malayan, and you're not taking an interest. But what can I do? If you like, you could make the Buddha expel Daba. And how can I do that? Go to the Buddha and say, Sir, this isn't proper or appropriate. There's fear, distress, and oppression in this district, where none of these should exist. From where one would expect security, there's insecurity. It's as if water is burning. Venerable Daba the Malayan has raped me. Saying, All right, venerables, she went to the Buddha, bowed, and then repeated what she had been told to say. Soon afterwards, the Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned Daba. Daba, do you remember doing as the nun Mattiya says? Sir, you know what I'm like. A second and a third time the Buddha asked the same question and got the same response. He then said, Daba, the Dabas don't give such evasive answers. If it was done by you, say so. If it wasn't, then say that. Since I was born, sir, I don't recall having sexual intercourse even in a dream, let alone when awake. The Buddha addressed the monks. Well then, monks, expel the nun Mattiya and call these monks to account. The Buddha then got up from his seat and entered his dwelling. When the monks had expelled the nun Mattiya, the monks Mattiya and Bhumajaka said to them, Don't expel the nun Mattiya, she's done nothing wrong. She was urged on by us. We were angry and displeased, and trying to get Daba to leave the monastic life. But did you groundlessly charge Venerable Daba with an offence entailing expulsion? Yes. The monks of few desires complained and criticized them. How could the monks Mattiya and Bhumajaka groundlessly charge Venerable Daba with an offence entailing expulsion? They rebuked those monks in many ways and then told the Buddha. Soon afterwards he had the Sangha gathered and questioned those monks. Is it true, monks, that you did this? It's true, sir. The Buddha rebuked them. Foolish men, how could you do this? This will affect people's confidence. And, monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. If a monk who is angry and displeased groundlessly charges a monk with an offense entailing expulsion, aiming to make him leave the monastic life, and then, after some time, whether he is questioned or not, it is clear that the legal issue is groundless, and he admits to his ill will, he commits an offense entailing suspension. The second training rule on anger. Origin story. At one time, when the Buddha was staying at Rajagaya in the bamboo grove, the monks Mettiya and Bhumajaka were descending from the Vulture Peak when they saw two goats copulating. They said to each other, "Let's give the he-goat the name Daba the Malian, and the she-goat the name Mettiya the nun." We can then say, previously we spoke of what we had heard, but now we've seen Daba copulating with the nun Mettiya. They then gave them those names and told the monks, previously we spoke of what we had heard, but now we've seen Daba copulating with the nun Mettiya. The monks replied, "Don't say such things. Venerable Daba wouldn't do that." The monks told the Buddha. Soon afterwards, the Buddha had the Sangha gathered and questioned Daba. "Daba, do you remember doing as these monks say?" "Sir, you know what I'm like." A second and a third time, the Buddha asked the same question and got the same response. He then said, "Daba, the Dabas don't give such evasive answers. If it was done by you, say so. If it wasn't done by you, then say that. Since I was born, sir, I don't recall having sexual intercourse even in a dream, let alone when awake." "Well then, monks, call those monks to account." And the Buddha got up from his seat and entered his dwelling. The monks then questioned Mettiya and Bhumajaka, who told them what had happened. The monk said, "So did you charge Venerable Daba with an offense entailing expulsion, using an unrelated legal issue as a pretext?" "Yes." The monks of few desires complained and criticized them. How could Mettiya and Bhumajaka charge Venerable Daba with an offense entailing expulsion, using an unrelated legal issue as a pretext? They rebuked those monks in many ways, and then told the Buddha. Soon afterwards, he had the Sangha gathered and questioned those monks. "Is it true, monks, that you did this?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked them. "Foolish men, how could you do this? This will affect people's confidence." And, monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. If a monk who is angry and displeased uses an unrelated legal issue as a pretext to charge a monk with an offense entailing expulsion, aiming to make him leave the monastic life, and then after some time, whether he is questioned or not, it is clear that the legal issue is unrelated and was used as a pretext, and he admits to his ill will, he commits an offense entailing suspension. The training rule on schism in the Sangha. Origin story. At one time, when the Buddha was staying at Rajgaya in the bamboo grove, Devadatta went to Kokalika, Katamodakatisaka, Kandadeviyaputta, and Samudadatta. He said to them, Let's cause a schism in the Sangha of the ascetic Gautama. Let's break its authority. Kokkalika said to Devadatta, "The ascetic Gautama is powerful and mighty. How can we do this?" "Well, let's go to the ascetic Gautama and request 5 things. In many ways, sir, you praise fewness of wishes, contentment, self-effacement, ascetic practices, being inspiring, the reduction in things, and being energetic. And there are 5 things that lead to just that. It would be good, sir, 1, if the monks stayed in the wilderness for life, and whoever stayed near an inhabited area would commit an offense. 2, if they ate only alms food for life, and whoever accepted an invitational meal would commit an offense. 3, if they were rag robe wearers for life, and whoever accepted robe cloth from a householder would commit an offense. 4, if they lived at the foot of a tree for life, and whoever took shelter would commit an offense. 5, if they didn't eat fish or meat for life, and whoever did would commit an offense." The ascetic Gautama won't allow this. Will then be able to win people over with these 5 points. Kokkalika said it might be possible to cause a schism in the Sangha with these 5 points, for people have confidence in austerity. Devadatta and his followers then went to the Buddha, bowed, and sat down, and Devadatta made his request. The Buddha replied, "No, Devadatta. Those who wish may stay in the wilderness, and those who wish may live near inhabited areas. Those who wish may eat only alms food, and those who wish may accept invitational meals. Those who wish may be rag robe wearers, and those who wish may accept robe cloth from householders. I have allowed the foot of a tree as a resting place for 8 months of the year, as well as fish and meat that are pure in 3 respects. One hasn't seen, heard, or suspected that the animal was specifically killed to feed a monastic." Devadatta thought, the Buddha doesn't allow the 5 points. Glad and elated, he got up from his seat, bowed down, circumambulated the Buddha with his right side toward him, and he left with his followers. Devadatta then entered Rajgaya and won people over with the 5 points, saying, "The ascetic Gautama doesn't agree to them, but we practice in accordance with them." The foolish people with little faith and confidence said, "These Sakyan monastics are practicing asceticism and living with the aim of self-effacement, but the ascetic Gautama is extravagant and has chosen a life of indulgence." But the wise people who had faith and confidence complained and criticized Devadatta. How can Devadatta pursue schism in the Sangha of the Buddha? How can he break its authority? The monks heard the criticism of these people, and the monks of few desires complained and criticized him in the same way. After rebuking Devadatta in many ways, they told the Buddha. Soon afterwards he had the Sangha gathered and questioned Devadatta. "Is it true, Devadatta, that you are doing this?" "It's true, sir." The Buddha rebuked him. "Foolish man, how can you do this? This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this." Final ruling. If a monk pursues schism in a united Sangha or persists in taking up a legal issue conducive to schism, the monks should correct him like this. "Venerable, don't pursue schism in the united Sangha or persist in taking up a legal issue conducive to schism. Stay with the Sangha for a united Sangha, in concord, in harmony, having a joint recitation, is at ease. If that monk continues as before, the monk should press him up to 3 times to make him stop. If he stops, all is well. If he does not stop, he commits an offense entailing suspension. The training rule on supporting a schism. Origin story. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Rajgaya in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. At that time, Devadatta was pursuing schism in the Sangha, a break in authority. The monks were saying, Devadatta speaks contrary to the teaching and the training. How can he pursue schism in the Sangha? But Kokalika, Katamo Dakatisaka, Kanda Deviyaputa, and Samudadatta said to those monks, No, Venerables, Devadatta speaks in accordance with the teaching and the training, and he speaks with our consent and approval. He knows about us and speaks for us, and we approve of this. The monks of few desires complained and criticized them. How can these monks support Devadatta's pursuit of schism in the Sangha? They rebuked those monks in many ways, and then told the Buddha. Soon afterwards he had the Sangha gathered and questioned the monks. Is it true, monks, that there are monks who support this? It's true, sir. The Buddha rebuked them. Monks, how can those foolish men support this? This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. That monk may have 1, 2, or 3 monks who side with him and support him. And they may say, Venerables, don't correct this monk. He speaks in accordance with the teaching and the training, and he speaks with our consent and approval. He knows about us and speaks for us, and we approve of this. The monks should correct those monks like this. No, Venerables, this monk speaks contrary to the teaching and the training, and don't consent to schism in the Sangha. Stay with the Sangha for a united Sangha, in concord, in harmony, having a joint recitation is at ease. If those monks still continue as before, the monk should press them up to 3 times to make them stop. If they then stop, all is well. If they do not stop, they commit an offense entailing suspension. The training rule on being difficult to correct. Origin story. At one time, when the Buddha was staying at Kausambi and Gosita's monastery, Venerable Channa was misbehaving. The monks would tell him, Don't do that, it's not allowable. And he would reply, Who are you to correct me? I should correct you. The Buddha is mine. The teaching is mine. The Master realized the truth because of me. Just as grass, sticks, and fallen leaves are whirled up by a strong wind all at once, just as various water plants are whirled up by a mountain stream all at once, so too have you, after going forth with various names, various families, various castes, various households, been lifted up all at once. So who are you to correct me? I should correct you. The Buddha is mine. The teaching is mine. The Master realized the truth because of me. The monks of few desires complained and criticized him. How can Venerable Channa make himself incorrigible when he's legitimately corrected by the monks? They rebuked Channa in many ways and then told the Buddha. Soon afterwards he had the Sangha gathered and questioned Channa. Is it true, Channa, that you do this? It's true, sir. The Buddha rebuked him. Foolish man, how can you do this? This will affect people's confidence. And monks, this training rule should be recited like this. Final ruling. If a monk is difficult to correct, and he makes himself incorrigible when legitimately corrected by the monks concerning the training rules that are recited, saying, "Venerables, don't say anything to me, either good or bad, and I won't say anything to you, either good or bad. Please refrain from correcting me." Then the monk should correct him like this. Be easy to correct, Venerable, not incorrigible, and please give legitimate correction to the monks, and the monks will do the same to you. For it's in this way that the Buddha's community has grown, that is, through mutual correction and mutual clearing of offences. If that monk continues as before, the monk should press him up to 3 times to make him stop. If he then stops, all is well. If he does not stop, he commits an offence entailing suspension.